Hey, and welcome to this jazz vlog on how to remember and retain jazz standards as part of your repertoire. Now this is something I don't think is often talked about when it comes to learning jazz. It's incredibly complicated genre to learn. There's a lot of information from both the soloing side of things, but actually just remembering the chords, the form and the melodies to the songs you know is a job in itself, which you need to take care of alongside learning to solo, learning to comp, learning to improvise. And here are my 6 tips on how I like to do this and things that have worked for me. Tip number 1 is to have a good grasp on the form of the song. How many bars is it? How many bars in each section? Is it a classic AABA? Is it an AAB form? These sort of things are critical for helping you map out a standard, and really important if you play with other people. If you get mixed up on the form, that's a big problem. So one of the first things I'd like to do when I learn a new standard is go, what's the form, how long is each section? Most things, you know, are 32 bars, AABA, each section has 8 bars. Another thing to take notice of with the form is, do the sections have a different sense of feel in each section? So take 2 standards like In a Sentimental Mood has a very minor sounding A section, quite sombre, then the B section with that key change and the major feel is much more uplifting. Another song which does that, There Is No Greater Love, we're in a major key for the A sections, it's AABA. When we get to the B, it goes to a minor based feel. So, you know, get used to the feel of the different sections, know the form of your song, because that's essential when you're playing the chords with other people. And it's very easy to get lost in form. So say for instance if it's AABA, you could be playing with someone else and be not sure which A you're on, and then you get into trouble where someone starts the B and other people are on the A. And something you can do to help with that is at the start of each section say to yourself, maybe if it's AABA, I'd actually think of it as A1, A2, B, and then A3. So I'd be like, right, in my head I think mentally when I'm playing rhythm for someone else, I'd be like, right, it's A1, it's A2 when that kicks round, and then when the third one comes around it's A3, and then when we get back to the start it's A1 again. Tip number 2 is to always strive to understand what you're playing, whether it be chordal or melodic. So taking it from a chordal perspective first off, for me what that means is you're able to look at a chart in the real book. Take something like, I don't know, Honeysuckle Rose, or maybe let's take All of Me. So you look at the key signature, you see there's no sharps or flats, that means you're in the key of C or A minor. Obviously this one starts on C and it's a major bass tune, so we're in the key of C. And for what me that does then is it triggers a set of chords from, if I put this table on the screen, so here's all the chords in the different keys, and if you look at the line on C, that's what I think of when I look at a standard for the first time. And my then process is which chords are in key, which chords are out of key. And it's kind of understanding, you know, why things are like they are, knowing that it's going chord 1, C, to an E7, which is a secondary dominant, not in key, because it's not in that line for C major. A7, another chord out of key, but it's the secondary dominant of D minor, which is chord 2 in that key. And that way, it's not just meaningless, it's not just C to E7, A7 to D minor, like you might have played songs before you came to jazz, like popular songs. It's, okay, it's C and it goes to E7 because E7 likes to go to A7, and it goes to A7 because A7 likes to go to D minor 7, and so forth. You understand why the movements work, you can map out where the 2-5-1s are and stuff like that. That will help you retain things a lot more. It's a lot more like theory based, but it's important and it's going to help you solo as well. And when it comes to knowing the melody, something like that, say the start of All of Me, you don't want that to be 8, 8, 9. That wants to be C, G, E. And it also wants to be root, 5th, 3rd. And that's in relation to the chord we're playing over. So as you can see, there's different layers. There's knowing something, and knowing goes da, da, da. And then there's knowing the notes and knowing the intervals, which is much more useful. You could then move it on the neck somewhere else and be less, you know, sort of rigid or stuck with how you have to do things. The other great thing about if you understand what you're doing, you'll spot similar things in other standards, which will just compound your learning and make things so much easier. Which brings me to tip 3, which is make connections between the songs that you're learning. Go, ah, that's the same thing which happens in such and such. Here's a good example. So I'm talking about chord movements here. So let's take the A train, which goes, you know, C major to a D7, often to a D7 flat 5, but basically to a 2 chord, which is a dominant. Oh, let's think of another standard which does that. Very famous Latin standard, Girl from Ipanema, F major 7 to G7. And if I do that, take the A train again with that Latin sort of rhythm. You can hear it's the same movement. So it's worth having these reference points. Take the A Train is often used as a good reference point for a song which starts on the 1 then goes to the 2 chord as a dominant 7th chord, and many other songs will give you these reference points as you learn more standards, providing you analyse them and learn them from the perspective of knowing the Roman numerals and where things are going and why they're going like they are. Tip number 4 is to begin by using sheet music or the real book, and that's the important word, begin, because at some point you want to stop using it and rely on your memory. Now, I never forget once going to see a gig at a local jazz club, and there was a few guitarists in this band, and they all had music stands, and they were on a risen stage, and all you could see was their music stands and their feet for 2 sets. One of the most bland and boring gigs I've ever been to. But I just thought, wow, you know, to be able to have to do a gig all with music the whole way through, it must, you know, I don't know how they ever relaxed into it. I mean, for me, that's really not what jazz is about. I mean, you've got big band chart arrangements, that's a different subgenre within jazz, if you like, where you do need, you know, everything written down. But yeah, I think when you're learning these standards at home on your own, try to wean yourself off eventually using that chart. Test yourself, see if you can remember each section. Try and play along to backing tracks or recordings without the music, but make sure at some point you go, it's time I started trying to do this without the music. Or when you're doing something else, you're stuck in traffic, you're walking the dog, you're trying to get to sleep at night, think, right, okay, so take the A Train, what are the chords? What's the section? How many bars in that bit? What does the melody go like? Can I remember where I play it on guitar? Now, tip number 5, easy one, keep a list of your repertoire. It's so easy to forget what you know, which songs you've done, which ones you've learned, which ones are kind of half learned, you know, and which ones are slipped away. And I think just a very simple thing to do in the front of a folder for practice or in front of the real book is, or on your phone even, is just to keep a list of which songs you want to maintain. And that's the important thing in that what I just said is which ones you want to maintain, because there might be ones you've learnt and you think, I don't actually like that standard, I don't want to play that, or I'm not ready for it, maybe you took it on too soon, it's too challenging. So keep a list and periodically work through that list. Have a part of your practice which is what I'd call repertoire maintenance. So if you're practicing for an hour, 10 minutes just to go back over something old, whether it be the chords or the head or improvising on the changes to it. And my final tip, tip number 6, is to learn the words, if there are words to the standard. Now most of them do have words. A lot of them were actually melodies written with words added later on, which is quite interesting, but learning the words will give more meaning to those notes. And for some people it might make it easier to remember them and remember where you are in the form. I know that some people, when they're playing the chords for someone else, even if people are improvising, they think of the melody of the tune to help them avoid getting lost. So it's something that can work for some people, definitely worth trying. And I think it also, when it comes to improvising, if you know the words and what they're about, for some of those standards, particularly some of the ballads, it might just help you get a little bit more feel into your play because you have a better awareness of what the song is about. So that was my 6 tips on how to retain and remember jazz standards. Now, have you got any tips or ideas or comments or questions on anything I've mentioned today, then do leave them below. It'd be good to learn of any other tips to help others out there. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. My name's Andy and I do jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and Saturday. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that like button if you've gained value out of today's video, and see you next time.